speaker, Christopher Lochhead. He has been described as a human exclamation point. He is, well, I guess sort of in a former life. He was a software CMO. He was at Vantiv and Scient and Mercury Interactive that maybe some of you remember. They got acquired by HP. Now he's an executive, a coach, and advisor at Playbook, which is his company. He's also the most read expert on dyslexia on Quora. He's a best-selling business author now, despite his dyslexia. He is the former lead singer of an underground punk band called Y-Trap. That was many years ago in Montreal.
You're digging deep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a writer on Fortune.com, yeah? Mm-hmm. He's spoken on stages around the world, most recently NASDAQ, which you can see on Facebook, but I didn't put a link to that, sorry guys. And Commonwealth Club, Churchill Club in Menlo Park. And now he's here at Fireside Chat. And of all the speakers that we've had here, I have known Christopher the longest of any of the speakers, or probably longer than all the rest of the speakers put together. And the reason that I know Christopher as long as I have is because he's also my ex-husband. So here's to ex-husbands and ex-wives, ex-spouses being friends. Please join me in welcoming my
Your ex-husband.
Christopher Lochhead.
Maybe we should talk about that.
But anything is fair game, you guys. So I never thought that you would write a book. Knowing you as long as I have, and also because of your dyslexia. And I like your book a lot. I thought it was, I don't know how many of you have read any or all of it, but I thought it was really funny and instructive and actionable. And the stories, I was laughing out loud. I was reading it on a plane and I was laughing. And then the footnotes are awesome, you guys. I've never read footnotes before, but these ones are funny and worth reading. Category design, that is ostensibly what we're here to talk about today. What is it? And if you're not a CEO or a marketing person or a branding strategist, why should you care?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's awesome.
Thanks for coming.
So, if you think about what most entrepreneurs or innovators of any kind do, and you unpack it, what you discover is, for the most part, they do two things. They focus on building what they hope is going to be a legendary product, and then a legendary company to deliver that product. And then when they get ready to put it in the world, they put it in the world and they go, ta-da! Our new carbidingulator. And they mostly talk about features and capabilities of the carbidingulator. And sometimes the world gets it, VMware, Twitter, and sometimes the world doesn't, Segway. And when you start to research what the most legendary entrepreneurs do, and it's not just entrepreneurs and startups, it's also innovators of any kind, really, what you discover is they do a third thing. They design the product, the company, and the category. And category design is very different than what most people would think of as marketing. Marketing is about the benefits of your product and screaming your brand as loudly as you can so the most amount of people in the world know Coca-Cola. What category design is really all about is explaining to the world why your innovation matters, such that a new category exists. And every product or service that you and I love exists because an innovator did those three things. We actually call it the magic triangle: product, company, and category. And what a category designer does that's different is, first of all, they teach the world to identify with a problem. And the problem's either one we didn't know we had. So for example, in the beginning, the DVR, TiVo. You and I didn't know we had a problem called we have to watch Friends at 8 o'clock on Thursday. That wasn't a problem. And they said, that's a big fucking problem. And they called that problem, they named the problem, they called it appointment viewing. Doesn't that suck? You should be able to watch Friends anytime you want. And we all said, fuck yeah, we should. And the minute we said that, we were then interested in the solution. So what legendary category designers do is they educate us about a problem. And it's either a problem we didn't know we had, or a problem that we didn't think of in the way that the innovator thought of it. One of my simple examples that I love, I'm a surfer, I live in Santa Cruz, and I live very close to the home of Jack O'Neill. And Jack is the pioneer of the surf wetsuit, the O'Neill Company. And if you buy a wetsuit from O'Neill, there's a tag on it with a quote from Jack, and it says something like, I'm just a surfer who wanted to surf longer. And the problem is, if you don't live in Hawaii or Mexico or wherever that's warm, and you want to surf, pre-Jack, you wore shorts and a wool sweater. And during the winter, you could last about 45 minutes. And then you got out and you were probably dying of hypothermia and Dr. Kathy needed to save you. And so he started mucking around with rubber in his garage until he came up with the wetsuit. And then he went out and said, isn't it a bummer you can't surf more than 45 minutes? When you get out of the water, you're about to die? Ta-da! And a whole industry was created. So that's what category designers do. They do all three of those things.
Oh, but then why should we care if we're not in business? Or if we're teachers? Or if we're retired? Or
Yeah, so the last chapter of our book, and I should say, the book was written with 4 guys, so 3 other guys and myself, and we can talk about why 4 guys if you like. But the last chapter of the book is all about category design for you as an individual. And all you have to do is read somebody's LinkedIn profile or their resume if they still have one to know that most of us in our careers make the exact same mistake that most entrepreneurs make, which is we scream our features. And so what individuals do in their careers is they do the same thing that category designers do. Mm-hmm. They get really clear about what problem they solve. And they solve that problem in a unique, and I'm going to use this word very much on purpose, different, as distinct from better, which we can talk about. Most people fall into the better trap and it really hurts them. So if you're an accountant, and you want to be successful, the way to be clear about it is to say, what problem do I solve that's different? Or that I solve in a unique way, such that it makes me stand out. And I then become known as the accountant who solves that problem. And if the world thinks that's a big problem, and then the world thinks that I'm good at solving that problem, I become an incredibly successful accountant. I mentioned Dr. Kathy. Kathy Halston has been our doctor, Christine's and mine, and many other people's doctor she's been ours for almost 20 years now. And she is a legendary doctor, absolutely. Christine and I can testify to that. And she also happens to be a category designer. Because 15, 20 years ago, when medicine was moving in a very corporate direction, and you and I couldn't ever get a hold of our doctor, or maybe we didn't even have a doctor, she said, and this is probably not what she said, but she said, fuck that. And I remember the conversation with her the first time I met her. She said, I don't like the way medicine is, and I didn't like being that kind of doctor because I actually want to take care of people. So she is a category designer in that she was on the front end of what today gets called concierge medicine. And it blows people's mind that Christine and I can send Dr. Kathy an email and we get a response. Dr. Kathy has called me from a chairlift because she thought, she wanted to respond quickly. And so she was able to create a product, a business model / company, and category. She educated the world. It was very clear the first time we met her that, wow, in the old days you used to be able to call your doctor or go see your doctor. And so what if you could do that today? And so concierge medicine is now a whole new category of doctor. And she's a category designer, although she didn't know it at the time. And so my point is, Dr. Kathy, saw a problem, which was doctors are getting further and further away from their patients and being able to get to know their patients as human beings and then treat them like human beings. And so she wanted to solve that problem in a unique way. And that's what every legendary category designer does, whether you're Mark Zuckerberg or whether you're Dr. Kathy.
So we have at least two musicians in here. That's a notoriously difficult field to earn a living in. Both of them are full-time professional musicians. What would you suggest for them?
So we talk about musicians in the book. As Christine said, I'm a happy and failed punk rocker. And my co-author, Kevin Maney, is as well. He's a great guitar player. And during the writing sessions for the book, we had many a night with many an IPA and many a song. And it turns out that legendary musicians are category designers. So in the book we talk about Elvis Presley. He's not just the king of rock and roll, he's a category king. He's the category king of rock and roll. And he was able to figure out a fusion of blues and soul music and a whole bunch of other things and put them together in a very, what at the time was incredibly provocative. I don't know if you remember the first time Elvis was on TV, they weren't allowed to shoot him below the waist because there was too much going on.
Yeah.
And so he created, and the word we'd use in music would be genre, but the reality is it's a category of music called rock and roll. And what made Elvis Elvis was not that he's a legendary musician. That's not what made Elvis. What made Elvis was that category took off. My favorite band of all time is the Ramones. The Ramones are the category designers of punk rock. It sounded, and again I'm going to use this word on purpose, different. If you know anything about the Ramones, what you know about why it sounds different is because they couldn't fucking play. They were a bunch of guys who said, hey, let's start a band. And they said, well, none of us can play, but we like each other. Let's get some shitty old musicians and start banging around. I used to have a t-shirt that had the chords for G, A, and D on it across the chest, and underneath that it said, now start a band. Yeah. And at the time in the 70s, rock music was getting very intricate. You had progressive rock and a lot of the Peter Frampton and all this stuff, and they're incredible musicians, and Pink Floyd, all this stuff that was very complex and very intricate and bordering on kind of classical music in terms of the level of skill and composition and so forth that you had to bring to bear. And the Ramones didn't have any of that shit. But what they had was a passion for music and a new idea, and off they went. And everywhere they played, new bands got started. When the Ramones played London for the first time, the founders of Echo and the Bunnymen, the Police, the Clash, the Sex Pistols, and many others were in the audience. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers said it was after a Ramones concert that they started a band, and many, many others. And so they're the creators of a new category of rock and roll. And the reason the Ramones had the success they had, again, was because of that category. And so if you look at music, Bob Marley's another great example. Was Bob Marley because he's the greatest singer or songwriter, guitar player in history? No. He was the category designer of reggae. And so if you're a musician, just like if you're an entrepreneur, just like if you're a doctor, what matters is what problem are you solving, what's the missing that you see, and how are you different about solving that. And if the world gets that, then you get to be Elvis. And if the world doesn't get that, you get to be me.
So
there's 15 people who think I'm awesome.
yeah, and I guess, look, we're talking about category kings, and there's a wide range of success within a category. You can become a violinist and be a successful violinist who doesn't create a new category. So we're not really talking about that. You're talking very broad strokes, of course, and defining a new category. Even if you're not the person who defines the category, that somehow you have whatever magical fairy dust and drive and whatever to, because you talk specifically about Jawbone in the book, where they defined, actually, they created 3 new categories, but they didn't become the king in any of them.
Yeah, that's a couple things. One is fucked up execution. So
P.S. Sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you didn't know already, Christopher swears a lot. He actually wrote a column, I think, for Fortune on the joys of swearing.
For CBS News. The funniest thing, though, I wrote for CBSNews.com for a couple years, and I didn't know, Dan Farber is the guy that got me to write, bless him. And when he asked me to write, I'm like, listen, I'm a dyslexic moron, you want to fucking A. Yeah. And he said, you just write whatever you write and we'll help you with it. And he said, you can write anything you want. And so, yeah, I wrote a piece called In Praise of Cussing. But because it's CBS News, they ran it, God bless them, Walter Cronkite's company ran it, but they didn't let me swear in it. And one of the reasons we picked Hollis to be our publisher was she said it was okay if we swear it in the book, and I think it's the second chapter. The introduction is written by Kevin, and then after that, the voice of the book is our combined voice, and he says that in the book.